Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Monsul. This is called Communicating Today, is our show. Been on Channel 10 for a very long time, over 25 years. We come on 3 times every week for those of you who watch us on a regular basis. We come on every Wednesday evening in prime time at 8:30 p.m. We also come on Friday mornings at 6:30 a.m. for you early birds. When you're driving to work in the morning and you're texting and you're emailing, which you shouldn't be doing because that's very dangerous. You should be concentrating when you're driving. But also a third time on Sunday afternoons at 3:30. So 3 times every week, one of the longest running shows right here on Channel 10. Before we get into our program tonight, and by the way, we have a terrific show for you tonight. I can't wait to tell you about the program, but first, as we always do, we dedicate these programs to my beloved sweetheart, Dolores Dee Monsul, who passed away several months ago. She's sorely missed. I love you, honey. I miss you. Can't wait to see you someday. But we got to get on with this terrific show, honey. So let's get on with the show. I have with me, sitting alongside of me, this very lovely lady whose name is Donna Urbikas. Donna, welcome to our program. All the way from Chicago, folks, by way of Baltimore. And appreciate it so much, Donna, for coming in to be on our program, because we're going to be talking about a very interesting subject, which happens to be this fantastic book that she just wrote. And I read it last week. It's about 280 pages, and it's a beautiful book. It's a fantastic book. I can't recommend it enough, highly enough. And we're going to talk about this wonderful book, and it has a title called My Sister's Mother. And that's about her mother and her older sister. And we're going to get into that right away. But first of all, Donna, thank you again so much for coming. And we usually ask people to acquaint our viewing audience about where people come from. And we've already mentioned that you're from Chicago. And we try to find out if people are from the D.C. area and they're locally raised or from some other place, and in your case, from the Midwest. But again, welcome to our program. And we are going to be putting up your website. Ladies and gentlemen, she has a terrific website. There's going to be a lot of terrific information on there for you to get. And let me give it to you right now. It'll be on the bottom of your TV screen periodically as we do our 28-minute show, www.danutaurbicas.com. You can see the spelling when you see it on the bottom of your screen. Don't listen to my pronunciation. It's probably not right, but it's close. But Donna, again, this is a wonderful book. And it kind of goes back to the beginning of the Second World War, back in September of 1939, when your home country, and I know your nationality is Polish, and your mom and your sisters and so forth, and your daddy, all from Poland originally, and was invaded by the German army on the Western Front under Hitler, and on the Eastern Front by the Communist Army, the Russian Army under Stalin. And they invaded Poland from both sides, and in a matter of 2 or 3 days, the war was over, and Poland was defeated, and they were conquered, and it was terrible. And that's what your book is all about. And your beloved mom and your older sister, Mira, were taken off and sent to Siberia. And I guess maybe you might want to pick it up from there, and what happened, and how this terrible blitzkrieg that was performed on Poland by both Germany and Russia, and how your family suffered through the terrible onslaught that came after that, and where they wound up. So if you want to kind of elaborate maybe a little bit on that, that's kind of the beginning of your book.
Right. So, John, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your show.
My pleasure.
Yes, Poland was divvied up between Germany and Russia.
Yeah.
There was a secret pact that the Germans and the Russians had signed in August of '39, and my mother and sister were living in what was then Eastern Poland, because Poland's borders were much further east than they are right now. Before World War II, and so she was a landowner. She had a small fruit farm, and basically what the Soviets did was they wanted people for slave labor, and so because of her being a landowner, considered bourgeois, and her my sister's father was had been in the Polish army, so this qualified them to be sentenced to 10 years of hard labor in Siberia.
Wow.
And so she was taken by really in the middle of the night in February of 1940. That was the first major deportation,
Yeah.
and you know, at gunpoint, and told to gather her few things that she had left at that point.
Yeah.
Her farmhouse had been plundered, and so you know, they were put on a wagon to a train. The train was maybe I don't know, 6 weeks, anywhere around there, and taken to a labor camp in Siberia.
Yeah, and your older sister, Mira, or Myra?
Mira. Yeah.
Was with your mom. Mom's name was Janina. Janina and Mira, your mom, who was probably, what, in her 20s maybe at that point?
She was 27, my sister was 5.
Was 5. So
Yeah.
these two women, a young girl, Mira, were taken on the train like a cattle car. And I was reading in your book about the terrible experience where they crowded these people, hundreds of people, literally crowded into these cattle cars. And all there was in the middle of the cattle car was a little round hole that was cut into the cattle in the floor of the cattle car, where these hundreds of people would go to the bathroom
Right.
as the train was running along on the tracks. I mean, imagine that. And the temperatures as they got closer and closer to Siberia were down sub-zero, probably many degrees below zero. There was very little food to eat, some kind of terrible, rotten tasting soup. And so they went through a terrible, terrible time, and then the temperature was plunging, and people started dying, and they started getting sick, and they were getting all kinds of infections and pneumonia and what have you, and hundreds and even thousands of people began to die. And it was just a terrible, terrible experience at the beginning of your book. And they wound up in Siberia, and here your mom, in her late 20s, was sent to a labor camp, and little Mira, the 5-year-old older sister, she's older, now your older sister, but your mom had to go out there and chop wood and chop logs like a man's work.
Right. You know, the communists, the Soviets, you know, decided that certain people, if they were in the country, they were honed to harder labor. And so my mother was tall, and she was, you know, pretty strong.
Pretty healthy.
Pretty healthy.
Yeah.
And so she was designated to be one of the people to cut down these. Actually, the trees were gigantic. They were maybe, you know, several feet across, but there was the branches that she had to chop down.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was extremely hard labor for her.
Yeah, and then they were covered with lice. Little insects were crawling all over them, and they were continually scratching, and these insects were biting them and sucking their blood. And it was just a horrible situation. I couldn't put the book down. I said, well, how can people have endured this type of thing? And your beloved mom, Janina, and this little 5-year-old sister of yours, and there they were, trapped in this terrible situation up in the terrible cold weather of Siberia. And they stayed up there, I guess, probably, what, for a couple of years before finally hope
Right.
began.
I mean, you know, my sister made a game out of these lice, by the way. She used to, like, try to catch them, and, you know, it wasn't always a horrible thing, but it was obviously something that was hard to endure.
Yeah.
But when Germany attacked Russia in June of 1941, one of the agreements that the Soviets had to do was to let go of some of these people that they had, and there were hundreds of thousands of these people that were deported into these labor camps. They had to let go of them. Unfortunately, they didn't really want to do that because that was free slave labor for them. So my mother actually was very brave, and she escaped with my sister. She was one of the only women from her camp that actually left, because mostly the men were leaving to join up with the Polish army that was forming at that time, and she went to follow the Polish army in the hopes that she would get some better food and clothing, and just find a way to get out of the Soviet Union.
Yeah. Well, then, I know that somewhere along the way in your book you were talking about your uncle, Uncle Walensky, who was also became a prisoner when the invasion took place. And he was confronted with a Latvian soldier who was part of the Russian army. And this Latvian soldier approached him and placed a gun in his face and said, I am going to kill you. I'm going to shoot you in the face. And your uncle Valenti said, please spare me because my mother back home is very ill and I have to go back and see my mother one last time and take care of her. And the Latvian soldier took the gun down from your uncle Valenti's face and said, I too have a mother back home.
Right.
And he spared his life. And I
Well,
thought that was so touching.
That was actually part of World War I, and that was one reason that my mother ended up with land, because Valenti received a large tract of land in the newly formed Poland after World War I, and when he died very younger. She ended up inheriting that, so that's how she became a landowner.
Yeah, and then when the Germans betrayed Russia, when they had signed this agreement with Russia, that they were going to work together and cooperate together, Germany and Russia, back in 1939. Then a couple of years later, in 1941, Hitler said, "To heck with Russia. We're going to betray Russia. Screw Russia, pardon the language." And when they went against Russia, said, "We're going to come after Russia, and they're going to be our enemy also. So we're going to conquer Europe, and we're going to take Russia with us, and we're going to conquer the world." This madman called Hitler. Yeah. And then all of a sudden the Russians said, well, wait a minute, we need to have somebody on our side to help us. So here's the imprisoned Polish army, and a gentleman by the name of Lieutenant Selecki was part of that Polish army. And the Russian people said, well, wait a minute, let's incorporate and let's bring these Polish army people into our camp so that we can unite and fight this guy, this madman Hitler, who's now betrayed us. So now all of a sudden the Russians and the Polish kind of became allies, if you will, and they were all against Adolf Hitler and the German army. And Lieutenant Selecki eventually got into the picture, and eventually he became your daddy when you were born later on in England. But he helped your mom, Janina, and Mira. Was he part of their process of escaping?
Well, he was caught in the beginning of the war when, actually he was in Lithuania, caught there and interned, and then he was sent to a prisoner of war camp separately from my mother, and they didn't know each other at that point. And then when Germany did attack Russia, the Russians had to let go of all these army officers. My father was one of a few hundred that had not been murdered at the Cotton Forest massacres. There were like 22,000 officers and other intellectuals that had been murdered there. And so when they were forming, when the Polish army was being formed, they came to a camp that's near the city of Saratov in Russia. And my mother was heading along with a lot of other refugees that were trying to find their way to the Polish army. So my parents met in that first camp very briefly. Later on, they met again. This was in Uzbekistan. There was another camp there for the army. And my father really did save them, because at that point, my mother and sister were they had nothing left. I mean, these people were shuffled across the whole southern Soviet Union, and because there was nowhere to go, really. I mean, all these people coming off these camps. So,
and that's what caused Hitler to lose, and the German country to lose the war, because when they went against Russia, they decided to attack Russia. They went up to Stalingrad and Moscow, and all of a sudden the freezing cold 20, 50 below zero Russian winter came in, and the German army wasn't accustomed to that, and they froze to death.
That's right.
And they retreated, they went back, and the Russians pushed them back toward Germany, and the war turned around. In the meantime, the Allies invaded Normandy on D-Day on June the 6th, 1944, came in from the west, and the Russians came in from the east, and Germany was kind of caught right in the middle. And that was the beginning of the end of that madman Hitler, because he was such a wise guy that he decided to go after what was formerly his ally in Russia. Russia and Germany were allies, and now he went after Russia, and that caused the end of the war to happen. And thank God that everybody was eventually, peace resulted in it when the war came to an end. But I just got the halfway signal, by the way, Donna, and I got to go back to the camera for few seconds and reintroduce the show for you folks who may have tuned in a little bit late, or I hope there aren't legions of you who did that. I'm John Monsul. This is Communicating Today. Been on Channel 10 for a very long time. We have a wonderful program we're doing for you tonight. This wonderful, nice lady sitting alongside of me who came all the way from Chicago, excuse me, to be on our program tonight. Donna Urbikas. She is the author of this wonderful book that she wrote that I just read last week, 280 pages of the most adventurous, wonderful story that you can imagine of her mother and her older sister who were trapped in the beginning of the Second World War. And it's all in this wonderful book here with a lot of terrific pictures in here too, and even a picture of Donna in the back of the book here too. But you know what she looks like, so you don't have to see the picture of her. I'm going to put the book down, but Donna, let's continue on with this. So now finally peace takes place, and your mom and your baby and your older sister Mira went from different places, different camps, and your mom started to become a nurse.
Right.
And she learned how to be a nurse, and she worked in hospitals and army hospitals and so forth. Wound up in India and a couple of different places, and finally all you guys came together. Well, you weren't around yet because you were born in England. They wound up in England. And maybe you want to pick it up from what happened in Coventry, I guess it was.
Well, my
Which
mother...
was really bombed the Germans bombed the heck out of Coventry.
Very
There wasn't much of that left.
Yes, my mother worked as a Red Cross nurse in India, and my sister went to a convent school there. This was a resettlement camp for the Polish refugees who couldn't go back to Poland right away because the war was going on.
Yeah.
And so they were there for almost 5 years. In the meantime, my father went to fight, the Germans in the Polish army.
Yeah.
And, when the war ended, neither one of them wanted to go back to communist Poland because Poland after World War II became
pretty desolate.
Became communist.
Destroyed.
Yeah.
Contaminated, yeah.
Well, because of the politics.
Yeah,
and so they both ended up in England, and they met there again. So this was, kind of this interesting love story, I suppose.
And I think they fell in love with each other when they first met. It didn't develop into a real beautiful true love, but eventually when they came back together again and met again and again, it became true love, and they decided to get what?
Married and have me.
And have you.
Yeah.
That's how we were able to get this wonderful, beautiful book that we're talking about here tonight, because you came along and you decided, well, eventually you all left England, Coventry, and decided, let's come to the United States, the beautiful United States of America, where there's freedom and liberty and opportunity and happiness and all kinds of great stuff. So you all came to the USA and decided to settle in Chicago.
Right.
And then pick it up from there.
Well, Chicago is a very large Polish-American community. It always has been. And my parents gravitated to there because of that reason. And my parents my father was a forestry engineer in Poland, so he loved the woods and he loved the outdoors, and my mother, of course, came from farm life. So they looked for a place in Wisconsin to retire, to
finish out their life.
Right, and actually bought it when I was 7, so we used to go up there for summer vacations all the time, and it was for many years. And then when my parents retired, I would go up there as well.
And then when you went to the farm one time, you saw the birthing of a calf, and that's in your book, and that was quite an experience for you. You couldn't get over that.
Well, my sister and I both thought my parents were crazy for starting a milk farm as their retirement place, but they did. They had about 10 cattle, which back then was not very much, but it was more of a hobby farm, I guess.
Yeah.
But there was one time when I was there, and my father needed some help because this cow was having this calf.
Having a calf.
And I was a biology major in school, and I thought, oh my gosh, did I get a chance to see this?
You didn't know what you were in for, what to expect.
No, it was quite an
And all of a sudden, this calf came kicking out, and your daddy said, tie the legs together so that the legs don't kick the poor mother to death. And out came the calf, and then it jumped up on its legs and it started hopping around. And poor mom was recovering, and the mother, I guess they have the cow.
The cow, yes.
Yeah, the cow. I got to get these names straight, but because I'm not a farm boy, I'm a city boy. But anyway, so that was an interesting story and part of your book. And eventually your folks settled down there, and you kind of went back and forth from Chicago to Wisconsin. Summer times, had summer on the farm, and then you had to go to school, and you went to the University of
Illinois.
Yeah. And then you got your bachelor's degree, I guess, there.
Yeah.
And then did you go for a master's after that?
I did. I have an environmental engineering
master's
from
also
IIT.
Illinois?
Illinois Institute of Technology.
Yeah. the Illini, as they're known as, the nickname, the football team.
Yeah.
Pretty good team too, by the way. But anyway, so then eventually Mom and Dad became older, and they began to go downhill a little bit. The farm was too much for them. And eventually, as we got down toward the end of your book, you had to begin to take care of them, nursing homes, assisted living. And your mom went through such terrible times, and you felt so sorry for her and so sad for her that she had to wind up, sick and going, deteriorating and winding up in the care of other people, including yourself, and you had to go and visit there. So might want to talk a little bit about that experience with your mom and dad.
Well, my mother, I had always talked about the things that had happened to her during the war when I was growing up, and so it had quite an impact on me. And I had asked her several times to write down the stories so that they were in chronological order and so that, we knew where we were and all that. So finally, when I became a mother, when I had my first son, she agreed to sit down and write these things down. And, that's been a long process in the book. And I think it helped her to kind of stop talking about all that stuff. And then, of course, when she was older, it was, something, she was not remembering a lot of the things. So I was really fortunate that I had her on tape and I also had all her notes and everything, of course, in Polish. And, and then I would go and, help them out as much as I could. And then I moved my father to Chicago, to my home, and my mother had to be in a nursing home at that time. That was very hard for me to do that because I had 3 teenage children at the time, so it was a little hard to take care of everybody. But they took care of me, so I. And then
you also had some personal problems of your own in your own family. Your son had a problem.
Yeah. So one of the things I've done with the book is I've tried to relate stories from my life that reflect kind of what happened in my mother's life. And one of the things that I thought kind of paralleled her story with saving my sister, because most children that were deported did not make it back. They died, there.
Thousands upon thousands.
And so when my son was diagnosed with cancer, I wrote about that because I felt that it would be kind of a parallel story.
Yeah, and then you had your own personal problem yourself.
I'm a cancer survivor as well.
Cancer survivor.
Yeah.
So you had to deal with these problems and health problems in your own immediate family, and then take care of mom and dad at the same time. We were getting older and going downhill and so forth, and visiting them in the nursing homes and the assisted living. And then finally, when it got down toward the end, and they start talking about that final stop, what do they call that?
Hospice.
Hospice.
Yeah.
And the end is in sight at that point. And then when you get down toward the end of the book, the last couple of chapters or so, I'm reading this book, and I'm reading in there about how you cared for them and how you worried about them, and you were sick over the way they were. You could see your mom going down quickly and your daddy. And then you had a
eulogy?
A eulogy, right, a eulogy for them. And I was reading in there when you wrote the eulogy, and you called your mom. Your mom died first.
Yeah.
And in the eulogy, you called her in Polish, Mamusiu.
Mamusiu.
Mamusiu, which means mother in Polish, which is her native tongue. And then later on, when Daddy lasted another couple of years, I guess, after your mother passed, and then when his time came, it was Tatushu, which is father.
Right.
Did I pronounce it right?
Yeah, Tatushu.
Mamushu and Tatushu, mother and father, and you gave eulogies for the both of them. And I don't remember. I remember the words in the book that what you said when Mom passed.
Well, when my mother passed, I felt that it was for something. That her life meant something, because I think she felt, she felt this burden of everything from the war, and never really in her younger years could stop talking about it. And I think it was, her life did mean something to me.
Yeah. And then when Daddy died, I love you, Daddy, Tatushu, and what was his name again, Daddy?
Well, it's a very difficult Polish name. It's Wawrzyniec, which is, I guess, short.
Is there like a nickname?
And,
A
well,
shorter version?
supposedly it's translated to Lawrence. I don't know for sure.
Lawrence?
Yeah.
Wow. That's a switch, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, it's such a fantastic book, Don. I just can't compliment you enough. I'm so proud of the work you did on this book and the way you took care of your family and took care of your mom and dad and all the terrible things they went through. We finally brought them to the United States, and you were with them at the end, and the personal problems in your own family. Congratulations on a fantastic book. And ladies and gentlemen watching our program, don't forget that terrific website that we mentioned before, and it's on the bottom of your TV screen as you're watching your program, www.DonnaUrbikas.com. And you can see the way it's spelled and the way it's pronounced down there at the bottom of your screen. Don, I can't thank you enough. It's down and got the 2-minute warning too, by the way, which means like the football games when the Chicago Bears are playing the Redskins and beating our Redskins, unfortunately. The referee comes out and waves the red flag and blows a whistle and says, "Gentlemen, the game is almost over," the 2-minute warning. Our program is almost over, Donna, but I can't thank you enough for coming all the way in from Chicago. God bless you. Have a wonderful trip back. I know you got a couple of other stops to make in the meantime before you go back. God bless you and your family. Thank you so much for coming on our program. And this wonderful book, ladies and gentlemen, you got to take this. This book is fantastic. My Sister's Mother by Donna Urbikas. I think I came pretty close on that one, didn't I?
You're good.
Come back and see us again next week, folks. We'll have another terrific show for you. In the meantime, we always go out by saying, keep on communicating for success. And wonderful books like My Sister's Mother and our wonderful, terrific guest, Donna Urbikas, all the way from Chicago. God bless, Donna. Have a wonderful trip back. Come back and, or maybe we'll come out and see you sometime to Chicago.
Thank you very much.
Reverse the trip. Bye-bye. 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 Oh. We're still on camera.